The international emissions trading is defined in the Article 17 of the Kyoto Protocol. This mechanism allows countries to sell their spare emission units that are permitted but not used. So a country can sell this excess capacity to countries that are over their targets. Thus, a new commodity was created in the form of emission reductions or removals. Since carbon dioxide is the principal greenhouse gas, people speak simply of trading in carbon. Carbon is now tracked and traded like any other commodity. This is known as the carbon market. The units which may be transferred under the scheme are of three types, each equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So the first type of unit is a removal unit or RMU, which is on the basis of land use change, and forestry activities such as reforestation. The second unit is an emission reduction unit or ERU, which is generated by a joint implementation project. A certified emission reduction or CER is the next kind of unit, which is generated from a clean development mechanism project activity. So, a carbon credit or a carbon offset is an instrument that represents a ton of carbon dioxide, or carbon dioxide equivalent as it's called, that's removed or reduced from the atmosphere from an emission reduction project. It means that ERU and CER are also a form of carbon credits. Here's how the system of carbon trading works. It's a transaction that transfers carbon credits between two parties under the Kyoto Protocol. The buyer pays the seller cash in exchange for carbon credits, thereby allowing the purchaser to emit more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The standards for this agreement are outlined by the International Emissions Trading Association. Transfers and acquisitions of these units are tracked and recorded through the registry systems under the Kyoto Protocol. An international transaction log ensures secure transfer of emission reduction units between countries. In order to address the concern that parties could oversell units and subsequently be unable to meet their own emissions targets, each party is required to maintain a reserve of ERUs, CERs, AAUs, and RUs in its national registry. Let's discuss some pros and cons of carbon trading. A well-functioning emissions trading system allows emissions reductions to take place wherever abatement costs are lowest, regardless of international borders. For example, if emissions reductions are cheaper to make in Poland than in France, then a country may install a project in Poland. Carbon trading is more appealing to the private industry. By decreasing emissions, firms can actually profit by selling their excess greenhouse gas allowances. Now let's discuss the cons of carbon trading. Many of the emissions credits are just given away, as businesses have a number of ways that they can gain extra emissions credits. The goal is to create a trade mechanism so that businesses are able to mutually benefit from them, but many of the credits are simply sold at auction to the highest bidder. Some credits are artificially high in price. It isn't just the government who can purchase emissions credits and not use them. Many environmental agencies have also discovered that they can purchase these credits and choose not to use them. They may not have the authority to officially retire the credits, but they can hold on to them indefinitely and create the same type of result. This means when credits are traded as intended, their price may be artificially high. Another con is that the emissions credits are almost always cheaper than converting to clean and green resources. For industries that use fossil fuels, the cost of converting to more renewable resources can be very high. The emissions credits, offsets, and even penalties and fines for exceeding the emissions limit are all cheaper than going through a conversion to a new source of energy. There is another method used in the carbon market to limit the emissions called carbon tax. This is a tax imposed on each unit of greenhouse gas emission and gives firms and households, depending on the scope, an incentive to reduce pollution. The tax is set by assessing the cost or damage associated with each unit of pollution and the costs associated with controlling that pollution. Getting the tax level right is key. Too low, and firms and households are likely to opt for paying the tax and continuing to pollute over and above what is optimal for society. Too high, and the costs will rise higher than necessary to reduce emissions, impacting profits, jobs, and end consumers. The first country to implement a carbon tax was Finland in 1990. Okay, let's compare both approaches. Under carbon tax, the price of emitting a unit of pollution is set, but the total quantity of emissions isn't. Therefore, a carbon tax ensures everyone knows the price being paid for each unit of carbon dioxide emitted, but the actual quantity of emissions remains uncertain. Conversely, carbon trading provides certainty about the quantity of emissions, but the costs of achieving these reductions stays uncertain. Specific emissions reduction levels can be agreed upon more easily than tax rates or policy instruments, which may vary in appropriateness and applicability between states. So each one has its own uniqueness and merits. Let's take a look at some more interesting examples of projects generating carbon credits. The Envira Amazonia project is a tropical forest conservation project in Brazil. It is a payment for ecosystem services forest conservation project, otherwise known as reduced emissions from deforestation and degradation, protecting nearly 500,000 acres of tropical rainforest. The Envira Amazonia project shall mitigate the release of more than 12.5 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions, while also preserving the habitat for an extraordinary amount of biodiversity, as well as directly benefiting local communities. The ultimate project activities are to undertake a forest carbon inventory, model regional deforestation and land use patterns, and mitigate deforestation pressures by utilizing payments for the project's ecosystem services, along with ongoing monitoring of the climate, community, and biodiversity impacts of the project. Next is the Delhi Metro Rail Corporation project. It has been registered as the world's first transport sector project under the program of activities of the UNFCCC, enabling it to quantify climate change benefit from all metro operations in India. The corporation has reduced emissions and earned carbon credits worth about rupees 41 crore annually. And with the increase in the number of passengers, this figure shall increase. A German validation organization conducted an audit on behalf of UNFCCC, certified in 2009 that DMRC, the corporation, had stopped emissions of about 90,000 tons of carbon dioxide between 2004 and 2007 by adoption of regenerative braking systems in the Delhi metro trains. With that, we come to the end of the course. I hope you're clear about the different Kyoto Protocol mechanisms to reduce emissions for a safer and healthier future. Please feel free to leave your comments and feedback on the course page. Thank you very much for taking my course.